Hello, welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage. I just finished about a 6-minute intro where I made a mistake at the end of it. And here I go again. Welcome back. I forgot to mention at the beginning of yesterday's video, the fabulous weekend that I had. I'll keep it brief for those who don't want to hear me talk. I had one guy complain the other day that I talk too much. If I didn't talk on the videos, wouldn't it be kind of strange to sit here and go, I could point. Anyway, when I was a kid, down the street from my parents' house, still there today, is a community college, a vocational technical institute. And me and my two neighborhood companions on our bikes would go down every fall when all the cool cars showed up. Because back then, cool cars were daily transportation for, kids just out of high school. And, we'd watch them leave every day and the constant traffic past my parents' house of cool cars. I've always been a car freak, probably since the doctor slapped me, I don't know. And long story short, I met a guy that was going to school down there when I was 15. He was 19, 18 and 19, just out of high school. He had a 70 Olds F85 350 Rocket bent seat 4-speed. That makes it pretty rare. The F85 was almost a 442, but actually kind of cooler in my opinion. It was more the stripped version. I think it had vinyl floor mats. I've been reading up about them a little bit because I'm trying to remember all the different options they had, but that was a cool car, and he and I became friends, and the 2 years that he went to school down there, we hung out, did all kinds of stuff, didn't get in any bad trouble. The age difference then meant nothing, and to this day, in my perspective, from my brain, everybody's older than I am anyway, so I'm always the youngest, no matter my age. As I get older, that's becoming a problem. But what I've always loved about car stuff, racing, it doesn't matter your age, color, gender, nothing matters. Just your interest in cars. So everybody's welcome, everybody has a good time, and all the stuff you see on TV, on the news these days means nothing to car people and racing. So at least it shouldn't, and I keep it that way. So after he graduated, he lived on a peach farm in Mullica Hill, New Jersey. His name was Dave. And he went off to live his life. And I continued in my life. 37 years later-ish, Saturday night, we met up for dinner. And I have to thank him for initiating that. And he brought his wife with him. And we had dinner. They had to cut the trip short and head back. But yeah, it's like 37 years didn't happen. But he's close to retirement. And we both lived our lives, but still friends. And that's awesome. So today we're working on this ATI super cased COPO Camaro Turbo 400. It has a manual valve body in it now because the car's built with stock eliminator where you're not allowed, I guess, a trans brake. And we're going to take everything out of it and save it. And we're going to install an ATI Wicked Quick, I love decals, billet aluminum valve body. Right there. It looks exactly like the transmission specialty ones. This is marketed by a few companies. I don't know who copied whom at this point. But either way, it's a familiar design. But this one, if you read the fine print, operates in first and second gear. There's a little note right here, and there's small writing on the box describing the valve body. I do like ATI's little tags for that. If you read the information, 400 valve body, billet aluminum, reverse pattern, trans brake, 1-2 brake. That gives you the shift pattern, park, reverse, neutral, 1, 2, 3. Wicked Quick and Turbo 400 and the part number. I was noticing on the dipstick over here, it says it's for a thick Bellhausen, ATI and aftermarket, and COPO. So they're really good about giving you little tidbits of information. Not the greatest marketing scheme, because when I looked up this valve body on Summit Racing, for instance, they don't list it as a 1-2 leave valve body because nobody took it all apart and read the little note or the fine print on the box. And if you go to ATI's website, you have to read all the information marketing it as a 1-2 lead valve body has not occurred to them. They have different marketing strategies in general, I guess. I'm one to always read the instructions and the danger. In this case, this transmission's already been modified. Obviously it was never stock to start with, but it has whatever mods are in it for the valve body that's in it. I have to go in and make sure that there's no holes plugged or holes drilled that shouldn't be to match this valve body. And that goes with everybody's brand when you start mixing parts. When you have transmissions that have been modified in the past, sometimes in areas that aren't blatantly obvious, can cause overpressuring and all kinds of problems if you don't catch it the first time. I was just having a conversation with another transmission builder friend of mine yesterday that, the problem, if you want to be a transmission guy or an engine guy or automotive stuff in general, this goes for not, brain surgeon, whatever, there's no room for mistakes, or you'll be looking at it again. So it's always, you got to do your diligence and make sure you dot the I's and cross the T's, and that starts with me reading the instructions. So, the little pamphlets, they want you to not have a wiring problem that would re-engage the brake when you don't want it to come on. That's not good. You wouldn't want it to come on at 150 miles an hour. There's been, I mentioned in the video yesterday, some online debates. There's a guy asking a few weeks ago, why does this car roll when he pushes the trans brake button? And my answer, you need to raise the RPM. You need to use the foot brake in the car. This is beyond the transmission issue, this is a driving issue. You need to use the foot brake, you need to use 2 feet. You need to raise the RPM before you push the trans brake button. Exactly what it says right here. Most valve bodies give you this instruction. They explain there's a lot of oil that has to be transferred, and the pump output at idle sometimes isn't enough. Nothing wrong with your pump. Raise the RPM, have less trouble. So that's part transmission advice, part driving advice. And they're actually pretty good. They tell you, they set the pressure threshold at 250 PSI, which is quite a bit. Under 250, you need at least 13.5 volts when you're at the starting line, just about to engage the trans brake. That's with the fuel pump running, the fan, whatever you got going on, you need at least 13.5 volts, and that's a tall order. You need a good charging system. And if you're above 250 PSI, which is a lot of line pressure, that's the reference in line pressure in the transmission. Checked on that port right there. You need a 14.5, you need a 16 volt battery and charging system with at least 14.5 volts. So interesting. So they're really good about giving you some information. A lot of other trans brake valve body instructions even go into how big the wires should be and whether it should be fused, and there's lots of other information out there. The instructions themselves, pretty normal stuff. You gotta make sure there's a bleed hole in the drum, 1/16, 063. I assume, and we're gonna find out, this direct drum is probably already drilled. We have to put in these high rate springs. Both the bleed hole and the springs help to fight centrifugal apply when the direct drum is counter rotating in first gear. It's just free spinning, and so are the clutches inside. And if there's a lot of oil in there, centrifugal forces want to apply these clutches and make them rub on the steels next to them and burn them up. So if you can bleed off some of that oil and have really stiff springs, you can fight that. And these both also help in release of the direct drum when that needs to happen. So I'm gonna leave off the center seal out of the direct drum. All normal stuff. On the center support, they actually show you, like the one I showed you last week where I had machined off the second Teflon seal ring back from the front of the center support. It says machined area for better flow and faster apply. You don't have to do it. You have to leave the seal off. But it tells you have to leave the seal off. Some tell you don't have to, but this one absolutely tells you have to. And Teflon seals, assembly lube to hold it in place, all that stuff. Nothing out of the ordinary at all. Semi-complete instructions. As I mentioned in the other video, there's no electrical pass-through in the ATI super case. They did away with the factory, 7/8 hole. They didn't give you any provision, so they sell you for extra this ATI 940-340. And just for kicks, I'm not sure if I mentioned it because I'm shooting this for the second time. The part number of the valve body is a 403-085. So, but the pass-through is a 940-340. It's a white threaded connector with an O-ring. They sell 3 of these. They sell a red, a black, and a white. And I guarantee you these are sourced from some other industrial application, from a McMaster car type place. I doubt they make these themselves. They might. I mean, they're a pretty standalone company. They make a lot of stuff themselves, like all the castings and stuff. Excuse me, but in this case, I ordered one. It didn't come with the valve body. And I called them and asked them what thread this was so I could have the case all tapped and ready to go. And then a little voice in my head said, don't do that. It's going to be a mistake. They told me it was 3/8/16. There's a 3/8/16 nut. As far as it goes, I'd have to force it a 1/2 inch down over there. It's straight thread with an O-ring. It's not pipe thread. I shouldn't have to force anything. But an M10 1.5 nut, that's perfect. And like all things in the world today, most of them are metric. This, whatever application this thing is for, I'm sure the holes are metric. So I'll tap an M10 1.5. Things will be fine. I'm glad I didn't drill and tap this north of $2,000 case going on advice I got from the company that made it. I'm sure somebody else could pick up the phone and they might have given me the right answer, but today they did not, or last week they did not. So that's always the way. You can read the instructions, but in the end, you have to use all your spidey senses and everything to try to get it right the first time. And then proceed forward. So unlike the Rossler transmission we were working on yesterday, where I only had to whip a couple of drums out, this case I have to take the valve body off anyway. I have to do some drilling on the case. I have to check the rear servo. Basically, I'm taking the whole thing apart. There's no way to cheat that. Plus, I want to get a look at everything. Never seen inside this one, so that's what we're going to do next. And through the magic of voodoo, that's what you'll probably see next. It's going to be laid here on the bench. Magic, just like that. In reality, it's 4 or 5 hours later. I actually stripped it, finished stripping it like an hour and a half ago. And I wanted to pause before I commented. 1, to get over my disappointment. And 2, to go to the ATI website and see what they had to offer and see what I was looking at. So, looking at it, we'll go front to back. Well, we'll start with the pan. It has an aluminum deep pan. I think you can quite just see it in the picture. When you use a flat cast aluminum pan and you use a black gasket, especially the far pack, when you go to remove the pan, this is a dry gasket on an aluminum pan, on an aluminum case, you have to hit it with a hammer to get it off. You don't need RTV, black RTV. This has black RTV on both sides of the pan gasket. Okay, boo-hoo, there's another 20 minutes cleaning that up. I'll get over that. Why does the front pump, why is it sealed in with black RTV? Is the machining on these cases so poor that that's required? Before, again, I don't want to say anything too damaging, but this is a factory ATI seal. It says ATI right on it. It was safety wired through the bottom 2 pump bolts. Once you cut this, they know you've been into it. I've been into it. So front to back, this is what you get. This transmission is listed. They list 3 COPO transmissions, naturally aspirated. That's what this one is, $61.95 on their website 2 minutes ago. And it goes up from there. They make a boosted version and a 632 COPO transmission. So in this version, the lowest spec transmission, you get a stock front pump, no big surprise there. Thrust washer, normal, right out of a transmission, nothing special. And that's fine, other than I gotta get the silicone off that, which is easier than getting out of the opening here without damaging the opening. While I was removing the pan, the overflow bolts were loose and it's eaten halfway through. This car has 11 runs on it. It's a 2016 COPO, 11 runs. The Allen headed bolts have almost eaten through the bracket. So that happened somewhere along the way. Inside the pan, there's a substantial amount of gray material. Again, this is with 11 runs. And I'm still trying to sound positive. For the forward drum, it's aluminum. That's a bonus. They sell this one. It says with a 4340 shaft, 1,000 horsepower limit. It is drilled for returning oil. It still runs the front stator bushing. It is neck down considerable from a stock shaft, but I assume maybe it's better metal. Either way, it's rated for 1,000 horsepower. Has a 5-clutch intermediate, 5-clutch pack on the forward. I don't know why I said intermediate. Just tan Borg Warners, perfectly fine. This, the forward hub, 100% stock Turbo 400. Not a billet one, nothing special. I can't explain that one. I could explain this away, maybe being stock eliminated, you want, less weight. No other concessions were made for weight, but that drum is available anywhere, so that's fine. The direct drum, also aluminum, which is a great safety feature. I meant to cover that yesterday. A cast direct drum in a Turbo 400, they claim critical speeds around 8,000 RPMs. That's why you don't put it in neutral at the end of a run. And you pray the engine stays running so it'll keep oil in here and keep this from counter rotating at 2.5 times dry shaft RPM. They sell this direct drum. It's only 34 element sprag instead of the 36 Pro Mod 1. It still takes the stock Turbo 400 clutches, and in the intermediate clutch pack they had 4 clutches. Same thing, Borg Warner tans, I believe. And they're just colored a little bit. I assume this is where my metal's coming, my darkness is coming from in the oil in 11 runs. I forgot to mention the direct clutch pack is a 6-clutch, waffles, greens, all standard stuff. Again, this car only has, I don't know what the horsepower rating is, 400 or 500, so I'm sure they built it accordingly. The lower unit is 100% stock with the exception of they machine off the O-ring groove and they cut it back to there to make it look shiny. They resurface where the band is going to grab. And they do not machine off the second seal back. They do, however, the last groove back, and this is a kind of a popular trick. They claim it saves the sprag, believe it or not, on the back of the direct drum. These half moon brass pieces fit, if you can see, I hope you can get the concept. Oops, they go on either side and it rides in the drum and helps support everything. And again, that's relatively popular modification. I know other companies do it. I know ATI, that's one of their things on the stock center support. They machine that slightly to fit those. It has a really robust in the super case. The super case has a roller bearing instead of a bushing in the back of the case. It's a roller bearing tail housing, has a very large thrust bearing in the back of the case. I find it odd that they do not use a beveled snap ring on the center support. They use what almost appears to be an intermediate clutch snap ring, but it's slightly shaped different, so they're probably interchange of the same thickness. Pulling off the rear servo, It looks like 100,000 mile dirty transmission. Nasty gray. Seal still on the accumulator. That's kind of odd. The trans brake instructions say to remove them, and I will. That's why I pulled it out, to see if they were there. The case itself, right full of gray material. Let me do the white glove test on that. So it's had some break-in stuff, potentially coming from the intermediate clutches. And that's what you get. So instead of me drilling and tapping my hole for the electrical pass-through and being able to probably just blow it out with a card cleaner, I have to scrape carefully the RTV, and when you scrape that, it's going to go all through the case. So I'll be completely disassembling it to clean it. Again, I drill and tap my hole right about here. I did a, what do you call it, proof of concept. I went ahead and took a piece of scrap material and drilled and tapped it. That way I got the right size drill bit out already. And I know I'm not going to make a mistake in this expensive case. So that I just wouldn't dare to do anything out. You know, it only takes a second to drill a hole in a piece of scrap material and try it instead of experimenting on the case. Oh, and the valve body, it's a reverse manual, just a converted stock one, cast iron. And that is the highlights, if you will. I wasn't going to take the bell housing off, but I knew I was going to have trouble getting the pump out. And I'm glad I did, because those bolts were not overly tight, nor were they Loctited, so they came out really easy. Not quite by hand, but they were somewhat loose, and I can see that this case has extra holes. I tried the ATI bell housing on the reed case, and that is not a go. You'd have to drill and tap holes. But I see the reed case would fit here probably with the extra holes. So that's where I stand. And tomorrow I will start in drilling and tapping my hole, scraping silicone, and start the assembly process. And we'll probably be putting in a hardened forward hub, because again, we're putting a trans brake in it. It's definitely probably a must-have at this point. So that's what we got, and hope you enjoyed watching. This video got longer than expected. That's not unusual. And I'll catch you in a couple days. Take care. I'll talk to you.